everyone is doing okay today. Let me see, I'm making sure my signal goes up. Good, my signal goes up. Yeah, I hope everybody's doing okay today. This is a happy Friday. Fridays are usually happy because, after all, it is Friday. I'm going to try to do this video in like 10 minutes, and I am trying to not say so if I am talking slowly, it is not because I'm stoned, it is because I'm trying not to say which means I have to slow down a bit. See, like right there. I would have added it on. Police. So why do I have police? Who am I policing? We are policing one Mr. David Pakman. We're policing Pakman. Now, why are we policing one Mr. David Pakman? Damn it. Pakman, in one of his other videos, attacked Ilhan Omar. Damn it, that is so hard to do. His attacks on her were utterly absurd, and I called it so in that video. The attack had, it was in that video. I essentially called him out on that video, but this video is another video where he's attacking someone, in this case, Tulsi Gabbard. He does not like Tulsi Gabbard at all, doesn't like her one bit. Now, I put my support behind one Mr. Bernie Sanders, and everybody knows me as supporting Bernie Sanders. However, I have looked favorably towards Tulsi Gabbard, and it seems that the attacks on her have been unfair and have been almost engineered to try to take her out the race early on, and I would even say there's a bit of resentment from what took place in the 2016 primaries. Pakman trashes Tulsi Gabbard in this video in a subtweet way. Do you know what a subtweet is? It's like you're saying something, but you're saying something else in the thing that you're saying. Like the thing that you're saying sounds one way, but there's something underlying that. In the way that he's making this video, he is attacking her on various elements. One very particular point is foreign policy, her quote-unquote anti-interventionalist stance, making this point of she's a hawk on war, but she's not this. One element of this video, however, is true. Tulsi Gabbard was working on a board of the COP with a Koch-funded board, and this wasn't put on her financial disclosure forms. This apparently is a no-no. Tulsi Gabbard has yet to explain this, and Pakman is right on that point, that Gabbard has to explain this. I suspect, if you're being cynical, which I am going to be for the moment, either it was a mistake where she just forgot to put it on the forms, or she just missed it, or she didn't want her name associated with the Koch brothers, in which case she didn't necessarily want people to be able to say, hey, she was working on a board with the Koch brothers. People would ask, why is this Bernie person working with the Koch brothers? It would be that type of thing. So let's flip over to Pakman doing his thing. Like I said, I massively disagree with elements of this video, even though the basic tenet, meaning what he called this video, is true. And she does need to answer for it. Or at the very least, give an answer to it. At the very least, to shut people like Pakman up about it. Alright, let's flip to the big one. Yeah.
She's advising a Koch brother-funded think tank, which to begin with is strange for a supposed Bernie-crat, but also the more interesting element of it, or maybe more concerning, is that she left the fact that she's involved with this think tank out of her financial disclosure form for 2017. So let's walk it through. Gabbard is an advisor to the Center for Statesmanship at Catholic University. And the Koch brothers made a big deal when this think tank was established. They gave $2.35 billion grant out of their foundation to create this. And on their website, Tulsi Gabbard is listed as an advisor. Okay, so the Koch brothers, they push right-wing, libertarian sort of ideology. We know that. Why is a Bernie-supporting Democrat advising them? Well, one explanation would be that the libertarian anti-interventionism sort of overlaps with Tulsi Gabbard's apparent anti-interventionism. And
so that would be my first thought too, right? I mean, ultimately Tulsi Gabbard is espousing a particular political position that is has been stridently against our engagement in these foreign wars. I think that's fair to characterize it that way. There are some right wingers that also hold an anti-interventionist perspective of the world. I've seen them, I've met them, and so I know they exist. Some of them are even on my channel. So I definitely know that they exist, and there's a dovetail there that on domestic issues on the home front there may be disagreement, but at the very least we should not be engaged in these foreign wars. Ron Paul will be two good examples of people on that spectrum. Let's hear Pakman continue though, because now he's going to be disparaging towards you.
That kind of brings them together with the Koch brothers and with this think tank. Except that that's not even really accurate, because Gabbard has said many times before that she's a hawk on terrorism. So she says she's against intervention when what she really means is she's against certain interventions that she doesn't find align with her views. Like, for example, leaving dictator Bashar al-Assad in power. We could debate, is he a good guy or a bad guy? But that's a separate.
I watched that clip more times than I can count. I think I watched that clip maybe 5 or 6 times. It wasn't that many times. As I watched the clip, something kept ringing wrong to me. I was like, that argument is wrong. That argument is wrong. There's something wrong with that argument. Let me see if you can hear it. Let's play it one more time. There's a flaw in this argument. There's a fatal flaw in this argument, actually.
Terrorism. So she says she's against intervention when what she really means is she's against certain interventions that she doesn't find align with her views. Like, for example, leaving dictator Bashar al-Assad in power. We could debate, is he a good guy or a bad guy? But that's
not really the debate, though. And that's not really the thing that you introduce. Here's the problem. Leaving Bashar al-Assad in power would not be an intervention, if that makes sense. Like, Pakman just said, well, what she really means, he's going to divine what she means, that she's against interventions that she doesn't like, and she's okay with some interventions that she does like leaving Bashar al-Assad in power. I'm not crazy. Let's hear it one more time.
That she doesn't find align with her views. Like, for example, leaving dictator Bashar intervention when what she really means is she's against certain interventions that she doesn't find align with her views. Like, for example, leaving dictator Bashar al-Assad in power.
If she's leaving him in power, Pakman, by definition, is not an intervention. He was already there. The term leaving implies that he was already there. An intervention would be something that does something that wasn't already the case. Meaning taking him out of power would have been the intervention in this case. Her anti-interventionalist, this idea of her being an interventionist in cases that she liked. If you wanted to give an example, this is not one of them, since Bashar al-Assad is the person who was in power in that country, like it or not. It's not up for you or me to like it or not. Ultimately, it is for the people of Syrians. I understand he's a dictator, but it is for the people of Syria to make the determination on what they do with Bashar al-Assad. It is not for us. If Tulsi makes the argument, I am against these interventions, and she's saying it is an intervention to remove the leader of a country, whether you like the person or not, whether he's a good guy or not, whether he's a dictator or not, is somewhat irrelevant. It is an intervention to remove him out of power. And the last time we did that, it created utter and complete chaos. In this case, I'm talking about Libya. Now, that means that her position is correct in this. Meaning, if that's her philosophy, if her philosophy is I don't want to be within these wars, I don't want to be intervening into these conflicts. Tulsi Gabbard's position in this was, if your goal is to fight terrorism, I'm a hawk on terrorism. If your goal is to fight terrorism, that you should be there to fight ISIS. But that wasn't what we were there to do. In fact, let's go to Vox. Somebody who, I'm pretty sure that's a channel that Pakman reads. The issue came down to this. Gabbard argued along with a small minority and foreign policy analysts that the best way to defeat ISIS in Syria was for the United States to align itself with the Assad regime. She argued that the U.S. should cut funding to the rebels fighting Assad, the terrorists fighting Assad. Ultimately, those were terrorists. The United States engaged itself using the CIA to foment a certain degree of resentment and chaos within the population itself. When that population rose up, we were there to give them weapons and guns, and seeing as they were already in the middle of a war, meaning war raging around them, access the terrorists to try to leverage those terrorists to take down the Assad government. There was a CIA and the military working at the exact same time with one notion trying to fight ISIS and the other trying to fight Assad. We intervene into the country militarily with a fig leaf of legitimacy from a legal standpoint. When Mattis was being questioned on this, Mattis said, well, the Obama administration, this was a complicated issue in the Obama administration. What he was saying, it was illegal. We illegally intervened into another country. Syria never attacked us. We were never under assault from Syria. Intervening would be to take down the government of Syria. Not intervening would be to not do that. And her position of, let's stop funding the terrorists in that region of the globe if we want to actually stop the terrorists in that region of the globe, seems perfectly legit. Bashar al-Assad, Putin, you can hate them all you want, but ultimately those are the leaders of those governments, and if you want to get anything done, you have to deal with them. We didn't have any issue with dealing with Saudi Arabia. We have no issue with dealing with Egypt. We have no issue dealing with Turkey. Why all of a sudden do we have this, dictators are gross, when we have no issues with dealing with them in the past? Her position is solid. This argument, however, that you're making against her, not so much. It is the interventionalist or the anti-interventionalist position to not intervene into Syria, to not take down Bashar al-Assad. All right, so this is the other portion that I want to go through.
Tulsi Gabbard. She claims to be about transparency.
All right. So the second portion that I want to go through is about transparency. So he makes this thing that Tulsi Gabbard is not being transparent by not releasing this financial disclosure form. Fair enough. If the form was supposed to be released, if there's an issue here, Tulsi Gabbard needs to deal with the issue. Fair enough. The second part, there's a trend with Tulsi Gabbard of not being transparent, as evidence to one, the financial disclosure form. But listen to what he brings up as the second one. He's going to bring up the trip to Syria that she did with Dennis Kucinich.
But she's not actually practicing transparency. Another example of this is a couple of years ago in 2017, Tulsi Gabbard went to Lebanon and Syria and met with Bashar al-Assad, who is the Syrian dictator accused of using chemical weapons against his own people. Initially, she refused to say who even paid for the trip. At the time, her office was asked multiple times, and they said, it wasn't funded by taxpayers. That's all we're willing to say. We eventually found out because two brothers, Eli and Bassam Kawam, said they paid for the trip, that the trip was actually paid for by these brothers who are connected to a group linked to the Assad regime and accused of pretty significant anti-Semitism. Of course, both claims that in their defense, the Kawam brothers deny. So this is a growing trend with Tulsi Gabbard, and I don't know whether anyone in our audience is still even thinking about supporting Tulsi Gabbard for the 2020 Democratic primary nomination. I've said before, I don't get the appeal. I've identified who are my top.
He said, I've said before, I don't get the appeal. And this is becoming a trend with Tulsi Gabbard. Does not putting Koch brothers on your financial forms reveal a pattern? I mean, come on. A cynical perspective will be that she just didn't want that shown, meaning she didn't want a connection between the Koch brothers on the form itself. And if you're a politician and you're looking at this, you say, what is my culpability if I am trying to run and people find out that I was in some kind of affiliation with the Koch brothers, meaning some kind of organization, not taking money from them, not supporting me. I'm still pushing for all the things that I'm pushing for, but nevertheless, the association itself may look bad. Versus, what is the culpability from a legal standpoint if I get caught doing this? If from a legal standpoint, the only thing you have to do is then account for it in a particular way and you get off scot-free as opposed to some kind of harsh penalty associated with it. Maybe. I guess I'm saying this. The Koch brothers thing looks bad politically from running on the left wing because the left wing has, for the most part, demonized Koch brothers. It may be true demonization, but demonization nonetheless. She doesn't want her name connected with them. It does make sense in a certain way to not fill that particular form and say, I accidentally didn't file that particular form. From a cynical perspective, fair enough. And she needs to account for it, so fair enough. But does it make a trend? Going to Syria and not saying who paid for the trip, does that indicate a trend of deception? I don't know if that's a trend. Also, the secondary thing of he has no idea her appeal, or the appeal of Tulsi Gabbard. The appeal of Tulsi Gabbard is the thing that you were deriding a few minutes ago, this anti-interventionalist stance. There are a lot of people out there who say, just like her, I don't want us kicking over the government of another country. It is not for the United States to have a decision on whether or not who gets power within a particular country. It is not for us to say that. That is not our right at all. That's the other thing that bugged me about this argument, per se, that Pakman was making. It is not for us to make the choice, the American, it's not for any American, for that point, to make the choice of who leads in Syria. It's just not. There are a lot of people who take that position. There are a lot of people who believe that the resources that are used in the military need to be used on the home front. There are a lot of people who take that position. If you don't understand the appeal of Tulsi Gabbard, I do not know why you don't understand the appeal of Tulsi Gabbard. Even though I don't necessarily support her as my main candidate, I want her on a debate stage. I want her making those arguments against war. I want that to take place. If you're wondering why people support her, that's why people support her. It's her platform. She gives you all of the other stuff that lefties say they want. But she also puts forth this idea of we need to change the way we engage the world, and we need to change our military policies. A lot of people agree with that. So I don't quite understand why Pakman doesn't get that. Nevertheless, the main thrust of what he's saying is right from the standpoint of her needing to account, I guess, for the legalities of this. So, let's see. David Maddow, Alan A. David Maddow. Somebody said Mad Cow. David Mad Cow. That's so funny. All right, I hear another one. So let me find that. Give me 1 second. Yeah, it's like, even if you're right, the main point, all the other stuff, see, is somewhat wrong. I'm going to have to trim this video because I screwed that up. Thrash. Pakman couldn't handle thrash anyone, even with a level 23 Nidoking and TM07. What is that? And Bastard. Thank you, Bastard. Yeah, thank you, Bastard. And thank you, Thrash. The main thrust. I think I said thrust, though, but I didn't say thrash. Alright, I'm going to end this. Yeah, I hated that. It puts you in a mindset when he's making this argument. It just came across as if it's up to the United States to make a choice on who's the leader of a particular country, and to make this argument that it's interventionist to want to leave a government in power. Well, the logical basis for that is, on some level, it is our choice on whether or not the person stays in power. It's just an odd argument to make. It's the anti-interventionist position to say the government of Syria, whatever that government is, hands off. It is for the government of Syria to make a choice on whether or not it wants to bring in help, like it did from Russia and Iran. It didn't ask us for help when we put our troops on their soil. We weren't there purely just for ISIS. We were there also to keep a check on Iran and to keep this kind of lily pad base into Russia. Our intentions in this are not clean. It's not for us to make that choice. That's my point. It's not for us to make that choice. The first step in a revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to a position of the ruling class, to win the battle for democracy, the Communist Manifesto. Well, if you're going to have any legitimacy at all, you're going to have to win it from that position. David, MSNBC man. MSNBC man. He does come across like an MSC man, doesn't he? Alright. I'm going to end this. I didn't like that video. I didn't like that video at all. This video had been on my list to finish and I just now got the opportunity to get to it. Omar is hot. Omar is hot. She is. She's very attractive. She is very, very attractive. Love Gabbard. Uh-oh. If Bull Like a Leopard loves Gabbard, I don't know if I don't know if I should like her. Look, there's a question to be had. If you're arguing against a policy like Gabbard's, it's the question that I wanted to ask Gabbard if she ever gave me an interview. That boils down to, how does your foreign policy line up with the rest of the world? Meaning, do you believe that if the United States pulls back, that there wouldn't be other elements, other forces that may have a contrary objective to the United States to fill that gap? And not just that, this argument of, do you always need to have a certain amount of domination? Like, weakness gets attacked or weakness gets preyed upon. With that argument being, you have to have a certain degree of strength in order to make sure nobody jumps you in the shower. And if that means that the U.S. pulls back, cuts his military budget in half, stops this idea of intervening into the affairs of other nations. Like, look, I think the basic argument is, does something else fill that gap? And does the thing to fill the gap becomes threatening if you pull back? And the question becomes, what does she mean by a halt on terror? Does it mean by using just purely elements of the military? Like, because if it doesn't, there may be other means, meaning economic, meaning working with the other organizations or other countries in order to affect change within the country itself. Her being a halt on terror doesn't necessarily mean she's militarily going to go in and bash and crack heads on terror, nor does it mean that she's going to arbitrarily intervene in other countries. That goes with the anti-interventionist thing. It does mean that she may work with other countries. It does mean she may use police forces as opposed to military forces. It's like, I don't think Pakman realizes that there are other methods of going after things, terrorism, as opposed to just blunt military force. And I would even make the case that blunt military force in and of itself is not enough to deal with the issue of terrorism. So, just saying. Just saying. Alright. I keep saying I'm going to end this, and you joke me when I say that, and don't do it. AI Pakman. Pakman's probably just jealous he couldn't score a three-way with AOC and Tulsi. Oh, God. Oh, God. That is so sexist. That is magnificently sexist. The hammer creates terrorism by design. Well, I always said, they're creating the enemies. They're creating their monsters. The things that haunt the night that they're calling terrorists are to some degree created by the chaos that we're causing in those regions. Afghanistan didn't look that way several years ago before we started pushing into, military into the country and pulling Russia into the country. Libya didn't look that way a few years ago. Like, those countries weren't always that way. Iran didn't look that way a few years ago. I've heard people say, oh, those countries have always been that way. And it's like, what are you talking about? Those countries weren't always that way. Those countries weren't always quote-unquote shittos. So, just saying. I'll end this here. Pakman is wrong on some of this stuff. On the root of it, yes, he's right. But on the other stuff, the ancillary stuff, not so much. Not so much. Captain Obvious. Hey Jamal, do you still consider a Pakman to be in your sandbox? Because I fucking don't. Let me say it this way. You can have, I don't have any brothers or sisters. I do have cousins. And those cousins have cousins, and those cousins have brothers and sisters, and we have a family. And members of that family, even though, we share similar ideology, let's say if it was a Christian family, all of them would essentially go to church to some degree. All of them would consider themselves Christians. All of them would consider themselves part of the United States, etc. Meaning, there's so many things being within that family they agree on. And let's say there's a certain wide agreement on economic issues, meaning, everybody should eat. Maybe they're not overly political, but everybody should eat, everybody should be able to get a hospital, everybody should, etc., etc. Meaning, basically, they're lefties, even if they don't necessarily know they're lefties. Even within the context of all of those things agree, people can still disagree on other elements. People still have other interests. Um, so it's like, if you're asking me, is Pakman within my sandbox in the context of economic issues? Yeah, the answer is probably yes. If you're asking on the context of, people getting access to healthcare, the answer is probably yes. Like, there are a wide host of elements that the answer will probably be yes on. But there are elements that are around the edges that the answer will probably be no on. But within the sandbox of political and economic, yeah, ideally. I mean, granted, he may push a Russian narrative. He may go off the rails on the Omar stuff. And even with stuff like this, if he doesn't like Tulsi as a candidate, he may even attack Tulsi as a candidate. But if you're asking at a core at a core level of, if he 3 a.m. with his God, what do you want the world to look like? Would that world look similar to mine, or would that world be relatively closer to mine than what this current world is? The answer is probably yes. And I strongly suspect it's probably yes in your case too. It's just this outside stuff that takes place that he's off the rails on. He's completely off the rails on. Ross Lawn Cole. Pakman has really gone downhill. It was always slightly beige, but now he just seems typical milquetoast liberal. I always said bland man Pakman. Jamarl, I'm getting sick of you bashing propaganda Pakman. All he's trying to do is be the next MSDNC infotainment star. He believes it's just enough so that the near future he gets his dream job. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Personally, my BS detector goes crazy when I give a Pakman any attention. Pakman is only his interests at heart. Wow, I don't know. You morons can't look at a website. Oh, God. People are being called morons. Propaganda Pakman. Yeah, he doesn't like Tulsi. He really doesn't like Tulsi. I guess I don't quite understand that. I mean, from a political standpoint, if you want less war in the world and you want less regime change, meaning Tulsi was strong on this issue of Venezuela, Tulsi was strong on this issue of, hey, we shouldn't be working with the terrorists in Syria, we should be working against the terrorists in Syria, even if it means propping up or leaving Bashar Assad to his devices. Yeah. I want her on the stage. Like even if you disagree with her, I want her on the stage. I want her on the debate stage. I want her up there with that anti-war, or let's say anti-interventionist standpoint, making the argument, pushing the people either on that issue or forcing them to declare who they are on that issue. That person also includes one Mr. Bernie Sanders. So yes, I want her on the debate stage to push Sanders. It's not so much that I want her to win, but I do want her onto the stage. And I don't want her, these demeaning attacks that are made. Some of the stuff just seems somewhat unfair. That said, fair enough. This is, I guess you can say, a real issue that she needs to be called attention to. But some of this stuff, some of these attacks are just off. Look, man, and it goes to the other point. You can have family members that piss you off, even with full agreement on a host of issues. Like, when I say this person or that person is in my sandbox, understand what I mean. Even among your family, you can have a similar political ideology, your mom, son, mother, etc., just the main central group, and still have arguments within that group. People see the world in different ways, even when they come to some consensus on what the world should look like, the basic underlying basis of how the world should be organized. So, yeah. So I feel you. If you're asking me, I'm saying yes, a person can still be within your sandbox agreeing on a host of issues and you still disagree with them vehemently. That's all. Tulsi Silverstreak is like Jules Snaggletooth. Keep it to make them relatable to common person. Luca Clemente, at least Sam Cedar demands that the Democrat at least one less concentration camp. Pakman will vote for the same number of camps. Pakman will vote for the same number of camps. Oh, that's funny and sad. Funny and sad. Yeah, that's funny and sad. This idea of voting for one less concentration camp. Yeah, at some point, you need to make a political statement. Meaning, when the United States makes the argument that it doesn't negotiate with terrorists, why is it doing that? Why is it making this pact with the NATO nations that if one nation is attacked, all of them will respond in kind? They do that because they want to have a very clear impression in the person's head, their opposition's head, that we will instigate forces almost in an automatic way that goes beyond us having the ability to stop if you do X. If you cross this line, it triggers X or it triggers Y. They do that because they need to know the other people to know the consequences of their actions. This idea that you're going to vote for any random Democrat, that seems insane to me. The Democrats have been able to skate on this notion that they can scare the hell out of blacks, Hispanics, workers into voting for them. Not that they need to do anything about it, they just need to point at the Republican and say how awful the Republican is. You end up with this system where it's a race to the bottom, where the people are arguing from a one less concentration camp standpoint, as if this one less concentration camp is enough to get you over the hurdle to vote for that person. The problem here is if what they're espousing and what's needed of the political moment goes beyond this one concentration camp. Maybe it goes to not having any concentration camps at all. And how do you ever get to the world without any concentration camps if you're always willing to vote for the person who's just pushing for one less concentration camp? There's something to be said about willing to say no, about letting an individual or group fail, particularly if that group's giving you and telling you that they're trying to do X and they're going to do X, but they never do X. I'm just making this basic point. If your political party realizes that it doesn't need to do anything because you're so terrified of the other party, then you have a system in which one person, one group, continues to get votes despite not doing anything for those votes. Your system suffers, your society as a whole suffer, because at no point were you willing to hold them accountable for their failures. And by the way, the reason that the Republican Party has been able to slide this far to the right is not so much that the society itself had gone through this radical transformation going from the 40s and 50s and 60s. Yes, elements of society has changed. I'm talking about the political disposition. Hasn't necessarily changed. The parties, the Democratic Party moved to the right. Lowers taxes. Goes, the country goes into massive amounts of debt. Yes, and I understand under Bill Clinton, Republicans raised the debt higher, so that's true. But I'm just saying the drift, the reason they've been allowed to drift is because the Democratic Party has also drifted to the right. As they drifted, the Republican Party just went right with them. Oh, wow. They've ceded this many yards? Just as a basic point, there's something to be said in being willing to say no. If they're saying we're going to do X, and what they're saying they're going to do is not enough for you, it doesn't meet your requirements of what's needed in the moment, it needs to be clear that your answer is no. It needs to be clear because as they go about pushing forward an agenda that you've already said no to, they need to know that they're not getting your support. That ultimately, if they push through that, they're going to fail. There's something to be said about being willing to allow them to fail. That's the only way you're going to get something fundamentally different. Do you realize if Hillary Clinton had won this election, do you honestly believe that there's going to be talk about Bernie Sanders? No, there's not. There's not. None of what has taken place from the standpoint of the energy and the momentum on the left would have been there if Clinton won. All of the lefties, or people call themselves lefties, all of the media would have shut up. Everybody would have just fell in line. They might have talked about their emails a little bit, but they would have been perfectly content with a society that was under pain and pressure. And then you get to the next 4 years, and then what happens? Oh, God. Oh, God. Just saying. Just saying. Is the drift the answer to where have all the haberdashers gone? Alright, I'm going to end this because I'm just running my mouth at this point. Alright, I'll end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the content through PayPal or Patreon. Oh, by the way, Patron Appreciation episode is still coming up 1 p.m. on Sunday. I think Miss Thomas is going to be there. We went to the doctor today. She had a endoscopy. She has really disgusting stuff in her stomach, and apparently her stomach is not emptying properly. So we're gonna have to figure that out. But nevertheless, she'll be there. Even if she's medicated, in order to be sitting on a stool, she will be there. But you'll probably see me later today. So I'll be back on in a few. Thanks all. I'll see you later. Oh, by the way, I'm also going to be on, damn it, I keep saying I am also going to be on, what is the show called? What is it? By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik. And that's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern. So I'll see you all in a few.